One of Colombia's most notorious drug lords was extradited to the United States to face drug trafficking charges. Partial elections in Great Britain and Northern Ireland are underway. Polling stations in the United Kingdom opened this Thursday at 6 a.m. local time. On Thursday, occupying troops assaulted hundreds of Palestinians in the Mosque Esplanade in Jerusalem. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Diego Martin, from the Telstar studios in Havana. We begin with the news. One of Colombia's most notorious drug lords was extradited to the United States to face drug trafficking charges. Otoniel alias Otoniel was the most wanted person in Colombia until he was arrested last October in the northwest of the country after a massive military operation. According to information shared by the independent news outlet, Usuga would have said during his hearings that the army continued to work in complicity with right-wing paramilitaries in some parts of the country. Citing a leaked Truth Commission document, the outlet said Otoniel had implicated 63 people as linked to the Gulf Clan, including a former minister, a former national director of intelligence, 6 former governors, and 4 former members of cabinet. The country's Supreme Court has launched an investigation into the people involved with the narco-trafficking gang. The Chamber of Representatives of Colombia rejected the motion of censorship against Defense Minister Diego Molano for his political responsibility in the military operation deployed in Putumayo, where at least 11 civilians were killed. With 28 votes in favor and 116 against, the Minister of Defense will be able to continue in his position in President Ivan Duque's cabinet. On April 26, the Chamber rejected the political responsibility of Minister Molano for the military operation of 28 in the rural zone Department of Putumayo, which left 11 people murdered. Despite the result of the vote in the lower house, the Minister of Defense still has a pending appointment in the Senate for a political control debate on the events in Putumayo. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Felix Plasencia arrived in Bolivia on an official visit to strengthen ties of cooperation between La Paz and Caracas. Plasencia will first meet a Venezuelan delegation before holding a formal meeting with the Bolivian authorities to review the cooperation agreements. The Venezuelan diplomat will finally talk with former President Evo Morales in the context of strengthening peace and diplomacy and regional integration.
All issues are central to our bilateral relationship. The agenda is strategic and ranges from energy, issues of rescue and care of the Pachamama, of the earth, of the planet. These are fundamental issues, as are those of the commitment to multilateralism. From here, from La Paz, our countries are the strong and solid voice in time and in depth in favor of multilateralism and against the interference and unilateralism that means sadness, pain, and war. We are the people defenders of peace, and that is what we want to talk about. And we will also talk about other issues that concern us: trade, commercial integration, air connectivity, many issues, education, exchange, formation.
Chile's plenary session of the Constitutional Convention continues the discussion about the justice system, the autonomous control bodies, and the constitutional reform, as well as about a special vote on the rights of indigenous peoples. The delegates only approved 2 complete norms in 2 paragraphs out of the 8 articles proposed on the central bank. The assembly members of different territories and the convention discussed about supporting by means of a vote the Article 21, which recognizes Mapuche lands and territories. The Mapuche delegates underlined that their peoples have never renounced their lands and territory and will never do so as long as there are state policies that promote colonialism, exclusion, denial, and abuse.
As Mapuche, it is my duty to refer to Article 21, which contains the recognition rights of the lands, territories, and resources of the indigenous people, because the Mapuche people have never renounced their lands and territories and will never do so. What Article 21 does is to refer to the treatment these rights receive in the international sphere and also in countries much more advanced than Chile in this matter. This norm contains the recognition of the special bond that the indigenous people have with the territory, which is not other than that material space in which we have developed ourselves as a culture and as peoples.
The representative of the Aymara people, Luis Jimenez, warned that denying the right of native peoples to their ancestral territories compromises their cultural existence.
Therefore, when we defend Article 31, we are not basically betting on one more right. We are not betting on something to enrich ourselves. What is at stake is the Aymara people. The indigenous people are going to continue existing as peoples. To deny us the right to the territory is to compromise our cultural survival.
The 7th International Seminar for Peace and the Abolition of Foreign Military Bases began on Wednesday in the city of Guantanamo, Cuba, with the participation of members of peace and solidarity organizations as well as anti-war personalities. The event is attended by delegates from 23 countries and 70 Cubans. The president of the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the Peoples, Fernando González Yurt, expressed in the opening ceremony of the Cuban people's demand for respect for the United Nations Charter and the return to its legitimate owners of the lands occupied by the U.S. military base since 1903. The president of the World Peace Council, Marieta Socorro Gomez, also condemned the U.S. occupation and the atrocities taking place in the base. The Guantanamo Naval Base, the oldest in the world, is used by the United States to supply logistical means to its fleet and as a point for invasions of Latin American countries and the world. The Caribbean community and the Central American integration system met Tuesday in Panama to address challenges of intra-regional cooperation in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting was led by the Panamanian Foreign Minister Erica Moines and was attended by at least 18 foreign ministers from Latin America, as well as the High Representative of the European Union, Josep Borrell. The meeting discussed problems related to the increase in the prices of crude oil, byproducts, and other basic goods. The Panamanian delegation presented the agreements reached at the 4th SICA CARICOM Summit on March 3, 2022, to promote a regional proposal at the multilateral level to reject the imposition of blockades against states and thus jointly face the consequences of the health caused by the coronavirus. We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi, and welcome back to From the South. In Peru, the President of the Council of Ministers, Aníbal Torres, will be questioned by the Congress of the Republic on May 12th. The national representation approved the motion signed by 22 congressmen last April 12th. Torres will have to answer 7 questions on the government's actions in the face of citizen protests and the decree that ordered social immobility in Lima and Callao last April 5th. The motion is based on the events that took place during the paralyzation of transportation workers and road blockades in different regions of the country, for which his presence is requested to explain the alleged inaction in the face of these events. The motion includes questions on the deaths that occurred in Junin, Huánuco, and Ica due to the police action during the events. It also asks for explanations of the people injured and detained. In Uruguay, groups of workers protested the dismissal of 150 workers and the reduction of up to 50% of the salaries of the employees who will remain on the payroll of a port company. The fact takes place after the agreement reached by the Uruguayan government with another company that operated in the port of Montevideo, to which it ceded all port operations until the year 2081. The workers carried out a 4-hour strike, indicating that the handing over of the port to a single company will generate labor instability. Authorities of the Ministry of Labor received a delegation of the mobilized workers who raised the need for the state to absorb the dismissed workers and find solutions to the wage reduction.
The conflict that we are announcing for a long time, since it is an agreement that the government made with Cato and Nati, which is a priority among many other things. They give it a docking priority. That meant that in November, Montecon lost a line as a result of this agreement. And now at the end of March, another line was also lost, which meant 50% of the operations that were lost from Montecon. In the context of 400 workers, you lose half your work. Evidently, this was very predictable, and we announced it a long time ago.
Polling stations in the United Kingdom opened this Thursday at 6 a.m. local time. These local and regional elections in Great Britain and Northern Ireland could be historic, especially for Belfast. For the first time in its 117 years, the Nationalist Party Sinn Féin could rise to power in Northern Ireland. The former political armies of IRA is the most voted party, according to polls on both sides of the border. For a century, Northern Ireland has been led by unionist governments that assume themselves to be British. However, the change and the turning point of voters in these elections, discontent with the new economic and social needs, promises an unprecedented result that worries London. This Thursday's election is also the first election that Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces after the scandal of his parties during the pandemic. 4,360 council seats are up for election, in addition to several London city councils, but attention is focused on the possibility that the Prime Minister's Conservatives will lose and that Sinn Féin will come to power. The Russian government delivered 17,500 tons worth of assistance and carried out nearly 1,000 humanitarian campaigns so far in Ukraine. Moscow said that since March the 2nd, it has delivered essential goods such as food, medicines, and medical equipment in the middle of the armed conflict. In the last 24 hours, 5 campaigns have been carried out in Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, and Kherson provinces. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on February 24th a special military operation in Ukraine to demilitarize and denazify the Donbas region, in his words. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said Wednesday that Moscow could attack arms shipments from NATO member countries arriving in Ukraine. The Russian official affirmed that the United States and its NATO allies continue to pump Ukraine with weapons and that any NATO transport arriving on the territory of the country with weapons or material for the needs of Ukraine's armed forces will be considered a legitimate target for destruction. This is not the first time that statements along these lines have been heard from Moscow. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned in a March that any arms shipment entering Ukrainian territory would be considered a legitimate threat. And the European Union authorities pledged to increase military aid to Moldova following the tension observed during the last weeks in the state of Syria. At a press conference, the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, said that they will increase the shipment of additional military forces of Moldova during the course of 2022. This measure is intended to help that country to strengthen its resilience and cope with the consequences of the conflict in Ukraine. They also plan to help that nation counter disinformation and resist cyber attacks. From Ukraine, residents of the cities of Mariupol and Yenizhutava, the Donbas region, tell about their experiences during the siege of the nationalist Azov battalion.
The Azov was there, yes. And then the armed forces of Ukraine as well. They tell you if you want to leave, go down through the basement. And among themselves, they were saying that they already entered another house, and now they were enter my house, house number 16. They were opening the gates, the Azov ones, and throwing grenades from there. Yes. There were people alive, like us. They were evicting us from the house. They were going to shoot at us. A tank approached the house, hit up the 8th floor, went through the whole house. The tank was Ukrainian.
I ran. I approached the doorway, and a projectile fell. My legs are still shaking. Oh God, I don't know. I ran. I thought my head had been blown off. I grabbed my head and thought, oh no, I'm alive. The whole car was full of holes. Another half of a second, and I was lucky, it didn't hit me. And I opened the door. A shockwave hit the doors, broke glass, and God saved me.
Now we go to the city of Rubezhnoye, northwest of Luhansk in the Donbass, where a battle for control of the town has been raging for 2.5 months between Russian forces alongside Luhansk militias against Ukrainian forces. Our special envoy Alejandro Kirk was there.
This is the part of Rubezhnoye liberated by Russians and Lugansk people's militias. But there is another part at the center of the city still controlled by Ukrainians. The battle has been raging for nearly 2 months now, and many wonder why.
In downtown, they are forcing civilians to stay. So our militia, our people's militia, is just not able to target where our people are. So we might have a little bit slow progress because we are avoiding the civilian population. This is a very important moment for us. These are our cities, our people. We've waited 8 years for this. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian army, just like they haven't spared anybody for 8 years, they haven't spared anybody here either.
This also helps to explain why the destruction is infinitely less than that of the port of Mariupol, where the Ukrainian strategy of using human shields caused tragedies.
Just as we came out, the incendiary bomb fell literally on this pole, on our entryway. Look how it came in through the canopy. We were standing on the porch, and this miracle happened, and we survived. A miracle, you know? I don't know how. Look at the footprints on the porch. Incendiary, a pillar of fire. That's how it went in there. It went into the atmosphere. So there is such a hole there now, and in the canopy it is a hole above the porch. First bomb hit the roof.
In this school, all the refugees are elderly. This is how their life looks like.
We stayed here because I'm afraid to go home. I came home and I have broken windows and splinters on the floor. What if those bullets were out there if I was there? I don't even have a wall to hide behind. It is on the 6th floor and the whole wall is the window. There's a huge full wall window there.
Alejandro Keg, Telesur Rubezhnoye, People's Republic of Lugansk.
We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi, and welcome back. Tensions arise in the mosque esplanade in Jerusalem. On Thursday, occupying troops assaulted hundreds of Palestinians in the area. In order to allow the entry of Jewish settlers, Tel Aviv troops stormed the area and attacked Muslims with rubber bullets, forcing them to take refuge in the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque, where they were again attacked by the rubber bullets and tear gas, while the occupying forces caused damage to the compound, recognized as the third holiest place in Islam. The Imam of the mosque, Sheikh Omar al-Kizwani, condemned the attack, while the Popular Front for the Palestinian Resistance called to intensify the struggle in the occupied territories. Since the end of 2020 in Ethiopia's Ogaden region, like others in the south of the country, there has been almost no rain. The situation is turning into a humanitarian catastrophe in a country that continues to grapple with the conflict in the northern Tigray region. In the afflicted areas, people eke out a living mainly from herding and subsistence farming. They are experiencing their fourth consecutive poor rainy season since the end of 2020, a situation exacerbated by a locust invasion that wiped out crops between 2019 and 2021. 6.5 million people are acutely food insecure. Dire conditions have amplified by the conflict in Ukraine and the economic sanctions on Russia, which contributed to soaring food and fuel costs, disrupted global supply chains, and diverted aid money away from the region.
We come across some of the mothers who, because of they are not fed, they are not getting any food, they are not producing enough food for children or enough breastfeeding for children.
People I know, they don't have even time, to care for after their children. You find a mother, staying with a sick child who cannot take her to the hospital or to the nearby health center because, the other needs are such overwhelming that, even she forgets the needs of her children.
The Global Network Against Food Crises revealed in a recent report that at least 193 million people in 53 countries were acutely food insecure in 2021. The study carried out by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, and the European Union indicates that the number of people who will be food insecure in 2021 represents an increase of almost 40 million citizens compared to 2020. The research showed that the most affected countries are Ethiopia, southern Madagascar, southern Sudan, and Yemen. The text stated that multiple conflicts, such as the one in Eastern Europe, increased the vulnerability of the world food system, while at least 570,000 civilians suffered catastrophes, hunger, and death, and 39.2 million people faced an emergency situation or worse in 36 countries. In Uganda, at least 20 people died in a traffic accident in the west of the country. Local authorities reported that a public transport bus crashed into a tea plantation while traveling from the city of Fort Portal to the country's capital, Kampala. Officials detailed that among the fatalities, 7 were minors. Local police began investigations to determine the cause of the accident and said it was one of the deadliest of its kind in the country in recent years. Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin hopes for a swift process if Finland applies to join NATO. If Finland decides to apply for NATO membership alone or with neighboring Sweden, the country hopes that the application process would be completed as fast as possible, said Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin in Copenhagen during a press conference of the heads of the government of the Nordic countries. A majority of Finnish MPs and the public are in favor of joining the Atlantic Alliance, and Finnish President Sauli Niinisto is to announce his personal stance on the issue on May 12th. According to Finnish media reports, the government's decision could be made in the next few days.
Move as fast as possible. If Finland and Sweden would decide to apply for NATO membership, the key issue is to keep the ratification process as short as possible. I think it's everybody's interest that different countries would move as fast as possible. That would be the best security guarantee that we could have. We are also discussing, especially with the bigger NATO member countries, what kind of security guarantees or security issues we could have.
We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at Telstar English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telstar English, I am Dio Martin. Thank you for watching.